Okay, hold that family, my name is Brother Ray Ray. We'd like to welcome everyone to the Brooklyn William Mackey Jr. History Club. We meet here every other Wednesday in honor of William Mackey Jr., Dr. Amos Wilson, El-Haj Malik Al-Shabazz, Brother Assad, the late great Alton Maddox, Louis Ray Rivera, Minister Khalid, Dr. Ben, Dr. Clark, Ivan Van Sertima, Renovo Rashidi, Miss Leona Maddox, and all the historians, Alambe Braff, who gave up fame and fortune. They gave up big cars. They gave up a lot of money because they chose the route of telling the truth and at least bringing some sort of substance to the people. They could have made a lot of money. They didn't have to, the historians didn't have to go the route that they did. They could have been like Henry Louis Gates and became rich doing the work of others, but they didn't. Professor Mackey and Dr. Ben, Dr. Clark were brilliant, and they didn't have to do what they had to do. So in honor of them and Miss Leona Maddox, United African Movement, who had an old car. She had a pretty decent car, but that car made it all the way from Teaneck, New Jersey, all the way to the United African Movement in Brooklyn, and she used to bring her food and eat because she believed in bringing people together. She believed in lectures, and we never want to forget Miss Leona. So for the people that came out in this weather to support the Mackey group, thank you. We're going to bring the camera over to the Amos collection over here. We have some books that we have to help Brother Sababu and African World Info Systems to continue the work of Amos. And I just took Sababu, was hanging out with him the other day, did him some favors, and he's still going strong and struggling with African World Info Systems. So we have Blueprint for Black Power. We have The Psychology of Self-Hatred and Self-Defeat toward a Reclamation of the African Mind. Sababu redid Amos's classic, The Falsification of African Consciousness. Black on Black Violence, The Psychodynamic of Self-Black Annihilation in Service of White Domination. African-Centered Consciousness versus the New World Order, and you hear a lot about the New World Order. Issues of manhood in black and white, with all the issues that's going on with the men. Louis Ray Rivera, Jazz in Jail, Awakening the Natural Genius of Black Children, and Distorted Truths, the Bastardization of African Cosmology. So we have these books, and I never want y'all to forget my good friend, Louis Ray, who came to the mantle when Professor Mackey left us. And Louis Ray Rivera came out of the project. Marcy knew my family, and when Professor Mackey passed, Louis Ray would come down here and he would speak for hours and hours. And he lived for a couple of blocks from here, and we would walk him home, and he would speak for another hour and a half, 2 hours by walking. So I never want to forget Louis Ray in this classic Jazz in Jail. Black on Black Violence. And you hear every politician, talking head, even our own folks. Why are we doing it to each other? Why are we doing this? What's happening with this? Black on Black Violence in the motherland. Sending black troops to kill other black troops via the CIA. And we are, the title of the book is The Psychodynamics of Black Self-Annihilation. In service of white domination. So whether we know it or not, according to Amos, is that we are still being dominated in some form or fashion. Every single one of us. We still got it. So this book in honor of Amos. So Sababu was doing good. He was hanging in there. So, I got some books I'm going to say real quick. Medical marijuana. You got these weed spots all over the place. The man behind it is George Soros, according to Lyndon LaRouche, because every weed is legal. You can't even stop it. They standing in front of the weed store instead of the liquor store now. And you're used to smoking and start laughing at everybody and looking for something to eat. They ain't looking for something to eat and they ain't laughing. So something going on. African slavery in Latin America and the Caribbean. So the European slave trade happened all over, not the transatlantic slave trade. The European slave trade. Let me go tell Doc to lower it down. The European slave trade. The transatlantic didn't enslave us. The European enslaved us. I wound up picking this up. When you want to learn about somebody, you buy the books. Every historian mentions books. Dr. Ben, Dr. Clark, all of them had millions of books. And when you want to read about somebody, you read the books and how many books they got on the individual, and you read it. Because there's things in books that it's not seen. You get it in the book. They put it in the book. You want to learn about the Musk Man, then you read about the Musk Man. In honor of Cynthia McKinney, how the U.S. created shithole countries. When Donald Trump talked about S-hole countries, he didn't tell you that the United States is the ones behind the creation of these S-hole countries, these rich mineral-based countries and continents like Africa, the Caribbean, with all the stuff. So Cynthia McKinney, when China sneezes from the corona lockdown to economic, and in my personal opinion, this woman is the only one that cared about the people of Georgia. And I wish when she ran for president, everybody would have jumped on board and voted for Cynthia McKinney and at least would have backed Cynthia McKinney, but they didn't. The manufacturing of a president. Wayne Mansfield, the CIA insertion of Barack Hussein Obama into the presidency. Excellent publication. So when you get this book, you read about it. There's a couple of other ones. Ladies and gentlemen, when you want to learn about some person, you get the books. The Shadow Party, how George Soros, Hillary Clinton, and the Democratic Party took control of the Democratic Party, 60s radicals. Excellent book. George Soros is behind a lot of the stuff that's going on. This blockbuster, Inside the Secret Network of George Soros, The Man Behind the Curtain. It's a relatively inexpensive book, but I tell you, when you get this book and read about this guy, he's like an octopus. He got his hands in everything. Read about this man, and his son, Alex, is at the helm. The world's greatest investor. The unauthorized biography of Soros. The lies, times, and trading secrets of the world's greatest investor. Get these books. Okay, in honor of Dr. Ben, we have the classic Black Man in the Nile, where Dr. Ben goes into all the stuff about Akulan, the land of the black. And Dr. Ben was the greatest.
Ashe.
Big ups to Trust Graham and the African Echo Study Group. Africans or Americans, Black Identity and Political Activism in New York City. 1784 to 1861. I want to thank the African Echoes Organization and Brother Trust and True and them for bringing this up. This is, you want to see what we was going through, and not too many people paid dues like we did, but they want to ride your coattail. Get this book. Another one, when Trust did the lecture here, the Zinga of Angola, Queen Nzinga. So I want to thank Brother Truss and the African Echoes group for talking about this book. It's readily available. Dr. Randy Short, The Impact of Religious Slavery. We want to thank Dr. Randy Short for this publication. So all the books is here. Every time you turn around, family, they got another coalition or another thing on reparations. Every other group, they ain't have to do no study. Everywhere you turn around, it's a study going on reparations. They must don't have this book where the dogs, the lynchings, where Cecil Rhodes cut the arms off for the rubber. Down south, hangings, the rapes, the beatings, the whips. So now they're talking about another study. How many studies do we need when everybody else got the money with no study? They gave the Jews money, no study. Japanese, no study. But here they got to have another study, and all the books is out. I mean, I ain't never seen so many studies in my life. Dr. Issa, thanks for Sister Filet for having Dr. Issa on the program. He has an excellent book called Blacklisted on the price that people pay to do what they do. In honor of Ayo Kamati, the Irritated Genie, his classic, Jews Are the Problem 1, and book number 2, The Psychology of the Jew. This excellent publication. I want to thank Ayo, and he's a bad man, he's putting it together. Okay. The 19 is not going anywhere. The real Anthony Fauci, what they did was disgusting, and you have to keep reading. Vax versus unvax. Let the science speak. Rand Paul, deception. The great cover-up of the 19. We want to thank Robert Kennedy and Children's Health Defense. Down the 19 rabbit hole. Excellent publication because we was had. Dr. Scott Whitaker, and he was on Darren's program this week, last Saturday. So Dr. Scott and his blockbuster Medicine, the causes and solutions to disease and malnutrition and the medical sins that are killing the world. We want to thank Dr. Scott Whitaker, and his book is readily available. We have it here for the people coming up. The Wuhan cover-up, Truth About COVID, Dr. McCullough. This is another book, The Medical Pharmaceutical Killing Machine. I want to thank Children's Health Defense for coming up with this book, and I'm reading it now, and it's telling you about a lot of problems that happens on the operating table that the average person doesn't know about. Capitalism on a Ventilator, on how much money was made during the 19, the billions and the lives that was lost. Edward Down used to work for BlackRock. BlackRock is an investment company that owns every single aspect of our lives. They're the big boys. They own us. Larry Fink, look up BlackRock. State Street and Vanguard. They control everybody. And look at the names. Larry Fink. Causes unknown. The epidemic of sudden death in 2021, 22, 23, 24, 25. And going on with all these unexplained athletes, basketball players, youth, unexplained death. And Larry Fink writes a book on how this is happening. Young, strong football players, soccer players. On the football field collapsing. And this is the blockbuster. I didn't get a chance to read this, but we got a lot of books we got to read. I want to thank Stephen Brannon, Pfizer's Crime Against Humanity. They wanted to withhold this information for 75 years. They did not want you to read what was going on. And I want to thank Amy Kelly in the War Room, Naomi Wolf, and they forced Big Pharma and Pfizer to come out with the Pfizer papers. And everything you want to know, what happens with the jab. This is a book that they did not want to let you know what was going on. And the Freedom of Information Act, they have to tell you. So this is called the Pfizer Papers. They have another book coming out called the Moderna Papers. It's supposed to be coming out this month, I believe. I know I put in to get it. They were supposed to send it. But I haven't got it yet. So for the listening audience, for the public to read and try our best to piece information together, because that's what the historians break themselves about, is trying to piece things together. And when you think you got it all, Professor Mackey used to say, you only scratched the surface. You only went like this, and there's so much other stuff. So that's why I mentioned books, because Professor Mackey, Dr. Ben, Dr. Clark, and all of them had thousands of books. They had so many books, they didn't know what to do with it. So everything is in the books, good, bad, or indifferent. So I'm going to name some community events for the listening audience and the public. If you're not doing nothing, to log on and tune into these programs. One of the hottest shows on the East Coast. Thorough Black Talk with Tad, Brother Taz, Sister Keisha, Brother Black, Sister Marcia. Thorough Black Talk. That comes on Fridays, on Thursdays at 8 o'clock, Facebook Live. It's called Thorough Black Talk. That's one of the hottest shows on the East Coast. And they got another young lady that's a part of the crew. So it's a five-punch, unbelievable, good program. Our Philadelphia Connection family. This is out of Philadelphia. This is Sister Empress Chi, El Pollinator, Brother Lumumba, and all our Philadelphia family, Sister Pam Africa. This is Thorough Black Talk. No, this is Blog Talk Radio with Sister Empress Chi. And that comes on every Saturday at 10 o'clock, and the number is 319-527-6189. PM, 10 p.m. And it's a Zoom, so you can log on and get in on the conversation, and we be getting it on. And I want to thank Sister Empress for this program, because it's an excellent program. Blog Talk Radio. Sankofa Revolutionary Radio with Brother Anthony Mohammed. Every Monday from 9 to 10, we have Dr. Haru, comes on from 9 to 10, and then from 10 to 11, we have Ayo Kamati, the irritated genie. He comes on from 10 to 11, and that's Sankofa Revolutionary Radio, WSYP 95.1 out of Birmingham, Alabama. We want to thank Brother Anthony Mohammed and Dr. Haru and the Genie, and every program that's on there is just unbelievable. Our Baltimore Connection, Brother Darren Mohammed, State of the City. He comes on Saturday, State of the City, on Instagram and Facebook Live. Also, he comes on sometime Wednesday, sometimes Thursday, but he has a blockbuster State of the City coming out of Baltimore. So we want to thank Brother Darren Mohammed for his information. On Saturday, it's 12 o'clock. And on Wednesdays and Thursdays, sometime 8 o'clock, sometime 7:30, you got to check. But it's excellent program. And once you log on, you can friend him and you can get his information. Thank you, Brother Darren Mohammed, for having Dr. Scott Whitaker on there, for giving up the best medical information and what to do with health and so. Good program. So Darren Mohammed, State of the City. Also, every Tuesday at 3 o'clock, Your Immunity Project with Dr. Aline. That comes on a Zoom meeting at 3 o'clock. Your Immunity Project with Dr. Aleem. That comes on 3 o'clock Zoom, but Dr. Aleem gives you a rebroadcast. If you missed the 3 o'clock, they rebroadcast the program at 7 o'clock. So we want to thank Dr. Aleem giving out a whole bunch of information. Your Immunity Project, California Radio. Thank you, Dr. Aleem. Our African Echoes family with Brother Trust Graham. The African Echoes family come on every Saturday every Friday at 8 o'clock. African Echoes with True and Danny and the gang. So that's African Echoes every Friday at 8 o'clock. The information will be put in the chat. And they give you a double header, the Know Thyself study group out of Asbury Park. Brother Trust is also the mediator of that blockbuster study group. And they're doing the destruction of black civilization on Saturday and the psychology of self-hatred and self-defeat on Friday. The Semotap organization with Dr. Mack and Sister Richardine Theodore and Betty Dobson. The Minefield program comes on WBAI every Tuesday at 10 o'clock. And we are out in the streets protesting. If anybody has witnessed Netflix and Steph Curry, who's down with it, financed it, the recreation of the Good Times TV series that we were so proud of in the old days for the struggles of the black family coming out of that project, Weenie Green Project. And they redid the series and made it into one of the disgusting cartoon creations that you will ever witness. So we have been going out and doing protests to try to stop this madness. So let me explain something to you. I want to thank Dr. McIntosh, and his birthday is coming up, so he comes on. No people is going to get anything when you don't demand respect. They're not going to give a people they don't respect a dime. If we can't stop Hollywood from degrading us, which they've been doing for so long, just degrading us in their movies, then how do you expect for them to give you anything when we can't stop the portrayal of black people in the movies by Hollywood? And when you see this cartoon, it's gonna disgust you. So I want to thank the Semotap organization and all the other organizations that's coming out and fighting to stop this madness. You can view all the lectures on Community Cop, or all the lectures on the Mackey's group on YouTube, Mackey's to the 3. Just type in B.K. William Mackey Jr. History Club and all our lectures come up. You could go through the lectures. Dr. Lewis, 11-part series on Burkina Faso. Dr. Munderson, Sister Keisha, and everybody that comes down. So you go, you do your own study, and you bring up the information. So ladies and gentlemen, this is the continuation of the great work of Dr. Arthur Lewis. He's been a good friend of Mackey's to the 3 and the B.K. William Mackey Jr. History Club, and he's bringing it on Ethiopia, Sudan, the Moors, and economic instability. So his docu-series on the Mackey's group on Burkina Faso and what's happening in the continent of Africa is unbelievable. So we're going to bring him on. He's going to continue his great work. And without further ado, I want everybody to give a great big hand to Dr. Arthur Lewis. You want to see that?
Okay, good evening, all of our African brothers, sisters, and elders. I want to extend my appreciation for all of you who take the time and effort to work with us and greet us at this time, every other week, to the Mackies, to the three, so that whoever is presenting and whoever is giving information, they also appreciate the fact that you take your time and effort to view the program. And as always, I want to give Brother Ray Ray and his family and his crew for working tirelessly to make sure Mackies to the Three is working, functioning, storing the information, making it possible for us to transmit the information to whoever is willing to look at it. We're going to continue an additional part of the series that we speak about in reference to the Moors. There was a program put on by one of the elders here, the Elder Trust, and in his presentation he dealt with one of the aspects of the Moors. So we all got together and said, let's see if we, the additional speakers, can begin to do a little research on the Moors to supplement what he gave us. And the reason that the Moors are very, very important in terms of part of the African history, because we're going to show and illustrate from what's in the material that's written, what's in the photographs of what Spain, Portugal, and that southern area looks like today, and the fact that the Moors played a major role in that area you call the southwest part of what you call Europe. Why? I believe, and most individuals who read about the time that the Moors, which is an African people, decided to enter across the Mediterranean at that time and period, around 711, to begin to enter and go into that part of Europe, southwest Europe, which you now call Portugal, Spain, France, Italy. 711, and then we were there doing things until at least 1480, when we lost power. So I was asked, like other speakers was asked, who will come to you to deal with the Moors, to give some type of presentation. So one of the ways that I looked at that challenge was, the Moors are important, critically important, but in keeping with the African history that we know, we decided to say, let us look back on Africa's interaction with what you call Europe, because the Moors went in to that landmass north of Africa of what they call Europe. It would be southwest Europe that you look at, Spain, Portugal, Italy. And say, why is that important? One of the connections is that those European people in Western Europe, you identify them as Dutch, English, Spanish, and Portuguese. It's because when you connect it to the European transatlantic slave trade, they always call it transatlantic. No, they should label it the European, so you clear on who did it to who. To understand, at that period of time when the Portuguese, followed by the Spanish, followed by the French, the Dutch, and who you call the English, they were able to exit Europe around 1500 and begin to interact in a negative way with Africa. But that's only part of the story of that trans-European slave trade. So I said, instead of talking about that directly, let's look at what preceded it to make it possible for those Europeans, white people, who lived in the western part of what you call Europe, which is Dutch and English, French, Portuguese, and Spain. You mentioned those four because in the last 400 years, they were the main European groups that left Europe, interacted with African in a very negative way in terms of going in, stealing, killing by the millions, destroying our cities. And these same group of Europeans around 1500, the English, the Portuguese, the Dutch, the French, and the English, they were successful in going to a landmass you call North America, and then eventually exterminating the indigenous people. They were successful in going in the last 300 or 400 years into that landmass you call Canada, in killing down the population in Canada. Then they also were successful to enter in what you call Central South America and the Caribbean, killing down millions and millions of people. To see it on the scope. So these Europeans were able to do that after they interacted for almost 800 years with an African called the Moors, who civilized, who industrialized that part of Europe. If it wasn't for the Moors coming in and industrializing and civilizing those Europeans who came from Spain, Portugal, France, England, and the Dutch, as we look at the different chapters, you'll say, who were these 5 groups of European countries? What are their origins? And when we get into looking at what the records show who was there, then we'll get a better perspective on the Moors, because the Moors just didn't come and pop up as if there was no other history there. So I make it a contention that when you look at Spain, you go look at a modern, contemporary picture of Spain, Portugal, in England, in Dutch, and you see those big, beautiful buildings and cathedrals, and you see the roads. That's what the Moors put there. They industrialized those Europeans who were living in the area. And then as we go a little further, you're going to find out that those Germanic people who came from the north and started the invasion of the southern part of Europe, they met another group of people who were living in those areas. So in other words, those Europeans you see today, according to what you can find in the record in the book, make up 2 types of human beings you call Europeans or white. Those who have been indigenous to Portugal, Spain, England, and Italy. They were a group of people who've been living there for tens of thousands of years. And there was another group of what you call European who was living in the north. That would be German and Scandinavia. So when we look at Spain, Portugal, England, the Dutch, and France, they are an admixture of at least 2 different types of Europeans. Those who were there in those areas for tens of thousands of years, and those who migrated. The German migrated, as Professor Mackey taught us, These Europeans came in history as marauders. They came down and conquered those other people you call Europeans. So the people you're looking at in Europe today, from the history and from what we can put, comprises two groupings of what you call European. A group that's been there for 10, 15, 20,000 years, and then the Germanic invasion that you now encounter in the form of France, and now you encounter in the form of England. And when we go through the series to build up to what the Moors did, they industrialized that area. The same way when we deal with the subject area about polytheism, the belief of human beings in many gods, and monotheism. So you bring it to the reference of Dr. Ben's, one of his books called Africa, Mother of Western Civilization, Mother of Western Religion. He's called the Western religions of Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. You first are going to begin to see Christianity come into Europe, creep into the Roman Empire. You're going to see Christianity that came from Africa. Not only are you going to see it begin to go into that part of Europe, which was Turkey, was Constantinople. Before Christianity was brought to Europe by the Africans, it was put there into Rome and put there into Greece. That's the first record of Christianity coming into those areas. So what we decided to do as to prepare you for the Moors, 1711, 1400, they industrialized and they civilized those group of mixed Europeans that allowed them to even come out. And I'll give you just one little connection. In one of the Egyptian temples, you have, there were 6 hypostyle halls where the gods stand. And in one of these hypostyle halls was one of the gods holding the sextant. You know that sextant, that instrument that you use to navigate your position when you look at the North Star. That sextant is what most countries still use. They navigate from the star. So the sextant you see in Egypt, ancient Egypt. And that's when the Africans came to, now you're talking ancient Egypt, whether it's 3000 BC, 4055. So you have the Africans standing with the sextant. The sextant was one of the many things that the Africans brought to Europeans. Let's give the Moors credit for it. That allowed them to navigate from the stars. And the North Star is 2 stars crossed. And that's what you use when you navigate in the Northern Hemisphere. That North Star is what the Israelis put in their flag. When you see that 6 corner, that's the double North Star that circulates. So they brought the sextant. They brought the shipbuilding. So when we get to that section of who was in Europe, who was in England, what is in France, Germany, who was there before the Germanic people come down. The example of Germanic people is the average Anglo-Saxon white person who runs this country, who came from Britain. What you call Great Britain. So the Europeans who call themselves English, who came to what you call North America, their ancestors came from what you call England, the great England, which was made up of Scottish, Irish, and Gaelic people. They were 3 people living there. And then the Germanic tribe, the Anglo-Saxon, will come in on them. So if we could go back 800-900 years and live with the people who are now in what you call Great Britain, we'd be living with people who call themselves Irish, Gaelic, you wouldn't have any Anglo-Saxon. So the people here who run this country, they come from the Anglo-Saxon, that Germanic tribe that invaded what you call Great Britain and subjugated in the north the Scots, in the Wales, and the Irish. Right now you look at the three people, you say, who's there? You have Scott, Irish, and Yale, and Scott, Irish, and Wales. Those people look at their heritage. They go back 5, 10, 15,000 years. Then you have another group of people which is Germanic invasion. That's the Anglo-Saxon. So there's a mixture of two different types of European. The same way these English, French, so-called Portuguese, Spanish, and Dutch went out and exterminated by the tens of millions people in Africa, people in the Caribbean, people in Central and South America. That whole rim from the top of the North Pole down, come down about a third from the North Pole and all the land surrounding, which would be the Greenland, it would be Canada. Most of that part of Canada is white. Most of that part of Greenland. But if you look at the pictures and you see was there, that whole ring had a group of human beings that look like you. They knock out tens of thousands, millions of them. So you presently are living now as a result of those dramatic people that Professor Mackey told you they came on the scene as marauders. They came down from the cold, the northern part, and they killed down those people, some of the most original people who are now in Spain, Portugal, Great Britain. They killed down all of them. You call them the Eskimos. They're all the people of color. So we as human beings, the earth suffered in the last 300 to 400 years, hundreds of millions of people exterminated by white people who identify themselves as white. No such thing as Christianity, Jewish, and all that nonsense. So we give you that because before you get to the words, you got to plug in these other things to understand it. So what we're going to do is we're going to deal with the book. It's called The 6 Crucified Saviors. And in preparation to dealing with the Moors, we have to deal with what you call monotheism and polytheism. Dr. Bennett said, as far as he's concerned, man created God. So when you say, what's monotheism and polytheism? Based upon what we could find and still exist, most of the human beings, when they were living on earth, how they interacted with each other in nature, they dealt with, created, whatever you want to say, supernatural arrangements around them to deal with their environment. So I'm going to read this. You have a copy. So for instance, I will just go through, if you pick up this over here, we're going to jump around a little bit. And you go to the second page. In the second page, I wrote polytheism. It's right there. What do we mean by polytheism? Not what I made up, not what I found in the book, but what they did and what still exists. And when we go around the world, you can document that every group of human beings had a relationship with their gods for thousands of years, and most of the world still have a relationship with their gods. Only the Christian, Muslim, and Jews work this thing about we only deal with one God, Abraham. But didn't Abraham say that when he was in the desert, thou shalt have no other God before me? So even in your Bible, he admitted, worship me, or the God, but you can have other smaller gods. It's right there. So what is polytheism? Polytheism is human beings' relationship to their existence on earth and what they call beyond earth, the heavens. And how did they relate to it? They related to practical things. Not I'm a Catholic and you can't go to a Jewish this, I'm a Jew, you can't go to this, and only Jehovah and only Muhammad and all that. As Dr. Ben said, you know, Muhammad was worshiping Aliyah, some of the female goddess. So we go on. What is polytheism? Is when you go to any culture and they deal with, how do you deal with it? Each of these areas around the world, when you study it, they're going to have, I just wrote down some of the elements. They have a god and goddesses. They all have gods and goddesses. They had babies. And no homosexuality here. So what did they have gods? They had God for agriculture, God for the air, God for birth, God for culture, God and goddess for creation, God and goddess for death, for health, for heaven, for hell, for family and children, for life, for love, for the moon, for your mother, war, water, planet, politics, sky, soul. So all of the human beings around the world, before and most of the human beings now, still have polytheism. There are more people, most of the people on earth are not Christian. You got 3 religions that only supposed to have one God. And that's not even true because you look through the Bible and stuff, you got angels and all of that. Those are little gods. All of these people, all these religions, all human beings had major gods and they had minor gods. And they still exist. And when it's on that first page. So that's what they deal with. You know, God of death, God of life. Now that page, you look on the right hand side, and I put polytheism, presently still practiced. You're Christian, you're Muslim, you're Jew. You are practicing religion which is a minority in the world. Most of the people in the world aren't Christian, most of the people in the world are Jews, and most people in the world are no Arabs, are not Arab, Islam. Because what do they say? The Old Testament, I give that to the Jews. It's all coming out of Africa. All of this is happening in Africa. So you have religion called Jew. That's what's that there? First part of the Bible, right? You have 2 parts of the Old Testament. That's supposed to be with the Jews. Torah, and the group of human beings coming out of Egypt. And where are they functioning at? Northern Egypt and all of that northern part and that southern part of what you call Asia. Then you have the Christians. You start beginning to see Christianity. Dr. Ben has a book he called Christianity Before Jesus. And that's what this deals with. This is the world of 16 crucified saviors. And then you have the Muslims. So you have the Old Testament. Then if you're a Christian, you take the Old Testament and then you put it together with that book. With, I guess that's when Jesus was here, right? I don't know the Bible, so I'm relying on you. So the Christian Bible is mainly taken around Jesus. And then the Muslim have the Quran. That's mainly dealing with Muhammad. So if you're a Jew, or what you call, you're picking up the Old Testament, all in Egypt, all dealing in Africa. In the Bible, when they went into the desert, Moses, whoever, said he had a big problem. They were worshiping the golden calf. What did Professor Munderson tell you? The golden calf is the goddess Hathor, the African goddess, female Hathor, who comes with cow's ears and comes as a cow and you nurse to show you that the mother of humanity nurses. So write in your own book. If you know you detail, you see they're talking of African gods and goddesses. So even your Bible, so-called the first Bible, Jewish Bible, whatever they call it, it's all polytheistic. Okay, so on the left-hand side, I just list a number of human beings who are living in the world who are presently practicing, they're not practicing Christianity, they're not practicing practicing Judaism, they're not practicing Islam. And I made a few here. Buddhism, Chinese folk religion, Confucianism, Canada something I can't pronounce it. Druidism, Hellenism, Hinduism, Santara, Shindu, Santeria, Traore, traditional African and traditional indigenous, etc. Most of the people on earth do not practice those three religions. When I was in Benin one time, it's a little kind of Catholic, overtly, because the French was there. But then they take you to the forest, the holy forest, and all your gods are there. In Vanuatu, they have their own gods and goddesses. And we were told that they had one god and goddess called Turaga. And Sister Hilda Linny, when she was here, Prime Minister's sister, stated that that god is known to the people in Vanuatu at least 9,000 years, mouth to mouth, and they still practice it. So that small percentage of indigenous people in Vanuatu who've been converted to Christianity by the French and English, they always want to convert you to either Christian, Muslim, or Jew. And once you get it, then they hook you into this. You're a Christian, you only can go to Christian church. You're Muslim, you only go to Muslim churches. They all want to lock you down there. So they had the wedding in Vanuatu. And at the wedding, they put on a white dress and a hat and a thing, and a man dressed with a tuxedo. As soon as they go through that motion, they take all that garbage off, throw it on them for 3 days. They still practice. That's what I recognize. So when you go and see it, and then you begin to understand the number of human beings, most of the Chinese are not Christian, Muslim, you got 1.4 billion don't deal with Christianity, Judaism, Islam. You got 1.4 billion Indians in India, got all their multiple gods there. So you got 1.24 India, 1.3, you got 2.3, then you take the 1.4. Most of the Africans still have their religion. You got almost India, China, and Africa. That's 3, 4. You almost got 4 billion. You got almost 2/3 of the world that don't deal with this. Christianity, Judaism, Islam. Nonsense. Not that it's nonsense. That's that European thing, the Arab thing, to lock you into that. So this is what they deal with. And we're going to look at the gods so you'll see what they're doing with. And this tells you what is presently here. Okay. We go to let's go back to the first page. I used a book called The World's 16 Crucified Savior. Because when your ancestors were living along the Nile, when we were in Egypt, we asked Dr. Ben, how come these temples had water spouts, when it rained? He said, because it used to rain here. He said, just remember, you're here now. But go back 6,000 years, because the earth tilts, whatever that tilt or rotation. The Sahara was once a lush forest and savanna. I don't have to say it. When they go down in the sand, you got fossils of crocodiles, you got fossils of whales. The water used to be there, and you have massive underground. So Dr. Ben said, look, this is in one of those desertification periods. But when that temple was built, 5,000 years, 6,000 years, and you see it on the temple walls and stuff. They're fishing for crocodiles. You see lions. You see tigers. That's why in the Egyptian, that along the Nile, you have many of your gods come in the form of the animals that were there. The bird, the hawk, the coyote, the wolf, the duck. They are taking these animals and putting gods into them. So this is nothing that I'm saying, this is what you see. So it rained then. So that's why you have to understand these basic small things so that you can understand better what you see. It's just like there are two books you can buy. When you go to the Indus Valley in India and Pakistan, I was on my way there, but I think what's that war when they bombed Syria? When that broke out, so I and a few people couldn't go. But on the books that you can find, you'll see the burial of those human beings in the Indus Valley, that's Pakistan and India. And you say, this is equal to what you see in Egypt, Sudan, Ethiopia. So you know definitely there's a tie. So the earth, climate and everything was totally different to what it is today. So in this book, you can buy the book for about $8 or $9. It's called The World's 16 Crucified Saviors. And what I'm going to do is read here 5 or 6 minutes so that you understand that what I read is the religion. That story, what happened with Jesus, when Jesus was born, he was sent down by who? Who sent Jesus down? His mother and father. What was his mother and father? Gods and goddesses. Right there is polytheism. Because Jesus was sent down by his mother and father to do good for mankind. And you have that story common. There were female gods sent down to help women in pregnancy. God sent down to help agriculture. So here is your story. In the New Testament, and the Arabs are taking it. Jesus was sent down by his mother and father. So he was a god. He didn't, in the book, it didn't say he popped up as a god. His mother and father made him. Not homosexuality made. All these gods had wives. All these goddesses had husbands. They tell you he was a husband. So he was sent down by his mother and father and the whole set of gods to come down to assist mankind, to help mankind to do A, B, C, and D. That's what your book says. So in the 16 crucified saviors here, there's a few more that documented what exists. You can find of this same story of Jesus being sent down by God from the high gods down to the gods. He was one of many gods. Jesus was polytheism. He sat down, he was working and did what he did, and they killed him. After they killed him, what did they do? In the story from Africa is that he was buried in a cave in Ethiopia. This is the African version, Ethiopian African, long before we would give it to Rome. And he went in the cave and he was resurrected. This is all in the Christianity, all in Ethiopian stuff. Doc Book Ben puts it in his book. So let's get this straight. Jesus was sent down by his mother and father, polytheism. This was him, his mother, and his father, to help mankind. He did what he did, they knocked him off, and then he had to go back. That's what they story. They're saying there's at least 15, but they count more, identical stories that different groups of people living in that area, people who are now living in what you call Turkey, people are now living all in Asia, people are now living all around Africa. They got the same story, so it's not a unique story. So it says, so here's what they say. That same story. And then I'm going to read here. It takes 5 minutes to read down so everybody will have an understanding of what Dr. Lewis is picking out. I don't create this information. You go and you dig and you try to put it. It says 16 crucified saviors. More than 20 claims of this claim of being invested with divine honor. God is divine honor. Have come forward and presented themselves in the bar of the world with their credentials. Two contest the verdict of Christendom in having proclaimed Jesus Christ, the only Son and sent of God. Who sent him? God. So in other words, there was at least a God there who sent him down. So Jesus is the big guy. Who's his father? Polytheism. So Jesus was sent down by the God. 20 messiahs. Messiahs just mean saviors. So they will tell you there's at least 20 stories of the same story where some God sent down his son. 20 messiahs, saviors, and sons of God. Son is God begotten through sex. Polytheism. You're all polytheistic, but okay. The 20 messiahs, saviors, and sons of God, according to history of man. Let's say history of men.
Is it our tradition?
Okay, let me say, and then
Our tradition. Huh?
okay, let me. It's so small here. Messiah, Son of God, according to history or tradition, have in past times descended from heaven. So the gods live in all some other place, and that's all your polytheistic religion. Every god and goddesses that humans dealt with all came someplace else and came all mixed in with us. They were all sent here. All the gods, all of the people or human beings who serve or worship any god recognize that them damn gods came from someplace else, from a man and a woman. And there was no homosexuality. Up to 20 saviors and sons, according to the story of tradition, has in past time descended from heaven and taken upon themselves the form of men, clothing themselves with human flesh and heaven, and taken upon themselves the form of men, clothing themselves in form of divine origin by various miracles, miraculous work, and superfluous virtue, and finally these salvation of the world and ascended back to heaven. Okay? You get the gist of what they're saying. Now I'm going to read for the audience the names of these so-called, I would say so-called, beliefs and who was in the area. All human beings was in the area. Bhatha Sa of India. 2. Buddha Saka of India. 3. Salavahana of Bermuda. Zulis or Zule, also Osiris and Horus of Egypt. Odin of the Scandinavians. Even the Germans got in on this one. Show you the influence of it. Krishti of Chaldee, Zoroaster and the Mirtha of Persia, Baal and Tar, the only begotten god of the Phoenicians, India of Tibet, Indra of Tibet, Bali of Afghanistan, Joa of Nepal, with Tawar of the, whatever it is, this Ptolemus of Syria, Atis of Theron, Zemolis of Thrace. These are those city-states all around. Zoar of Bozan, Adon of Asian, Dabatal and this long name of Siam, Ali of Thebes, Mikado of the Sinoms, Bedua of Japan, Heris or Eris of Duris, Thor, son of Odin of, you're talking people way up in the north, all the way through Egypt, that whole mass area. Cadmus of Greece, Hill and Feeder of the Mandans, Gente of the Mexico, University Monarch of Seblis, Isla of Island of Formosa, Debidan Chief of Play, Holy of so-and-so, Quarry and the Teen of China, Sons of the Virgin List of Greece. So in other words, this surprised Savior took up most of Northern Africa. It went all the way through. They talking about the Germans with their version of it, India, Pakistan with their version, all over. And so we have to remember the indigenous people all over the world still have their polytheism. Okay? Now, for the next 10 minutes, I'm going to read the names of the particular gods and goddesses of these different countries. The polytheism, now, remember Rome, what you call Rome, began to adapt Christianity little by little because they used to kill Christians. So when this concept of a Jesus and his father and mother, what you call Christianity, began to creep into Roman culture. Romans said, what are you talking about? We got all our gods already. Why are you asking us to take up a god called Jesus? We got our gods already. And so we go over here. The Romans and the Greeks. Jupiter. The Roman god, the equivalent is Zeus. The sky and thunder. Notice the connection between the environment and what happens between two of you. Juno, marriage of women. German, Greek, Hera. Neptune for the Roman, for the sea and the water. The Greeks call Poseidon. These are all coming from your gods. Minerva from Rome. Wisdom, craft, and war, Athena from Greece. Mars from Rome. War and strength, Ares from Greece. Venus, love, beauty, fertility, Aphrodite. You find all the equivalent gods all through Egypt. Okay. Apollo for the sun, music, and healing. Adoro, if you Greek. Diana, the moon. Athenis. Vulcan, the Romans for fire, metal, and work. Estes, Vesta in Rome for family. Hestia, if you Greek. Mercury in Rome is commerce and travel, and Hermes and Ceres for agriculture, and the Greeks is Demetrius. All of this what they were practicing. When Christianity came into the Roman Empire, that's when the Christianity comes through what you call the Vatican. And that's where the Europeans come. That's where Europeans who are Christian, they got it through the Greeks and they got it through the Romans as the story penetrated from Africa. All polytheism. So that's your origin of Christianity in Europe through Greece and through Rome because of the connection and association. That's the influence of Africa on the world in terms of Christianity. That's why Doc wrote the book, Africa, Mother of Western Religion. Polytheism, Hellenic, Greek, Roman, Metroist, Suet of Isis, Celtic, Germanic, Slavic, Baltic, Irish, Scottish, Gael, they all had it, they all had it. And then you're going to find out in the late Roman Empire, I forgot the name of the Irish god, the Irish convert who went around in England trying to convert everybody. Anybody remember? Okay, I don't remember who again. Huh? But that's what he was doing. They were now evangelizing and pushing. Okay. Now we're going on. Oh boy. Yoruba, the religion of the Yoruba, polytheism. They have 400, the next page, 400 working Yoruba, you know that big area in Africa, right? They got 401 working gods and goddesses. But they have a total of 6,000. You think they're messing with Jesus as one? The Romans, that's when they start talking about Jesus' sacrifice, but we have this already, and these gods already been through this. We already know about this. Okay. So the Yoruba, Abata, to create. Osun, love and beauty. Shango, thunder and justice. Ogun, iron, war, hunt. Eshu, messenger. Oya, wind, storm, lightning. Your Mero river, water. Oko, fertility and farm. Orango, wisdom and knowledge. Oba, river. Adu, Duma, divine king. Olurun, create heavens. Ogun, volcanic. They all had it. Then we swing over in that same page, because we'll finish out in about 10 minutes with all these gods and goddesses, but we put them in for emphasis. The most of the Yoruba ain't dealing with no Jesus, ain't dealing this stuff is deep, but the propaganda here. Okay, so now on this page, Viking, polytheism, Odin, father, deadly and wisdom, Thor, thunder and strength, Frigg, F-R-I-G-G, female, these are male and female. Odin, wife, mother, fertility, holy child, Freyo, love and beauty, Tyre, war, justice, Boulder, light, beauty, Sith. They all had it. They still have it. You go to these different countries, ain't nobody in Vanuatu. There's a group of the Vanuatu people from Vanuatu. They have little number. A little number is, what's the name for a little number? Regular human being in Vanuatu. What do you call them in Africa? The Twa. Okay? The European pygmy. And one of the main goddess and gods of Egypt, Sudan, Ethiopia was goddess Bes, who is short, both man and woman. Not no homosexuality, to show you the combination of the complementary. Goddess Bes. Common to all of those there.
You said it was one God? Is that what you're saying? It was both?
One of the many gods that's along the Nile. Remember, Ethiopia, think of it in three parts. Egypt, this is north, right? This is north. From here to here is all of Africa, north to south. Ethiopia is in the northeast corner of Africa.
Okay.
Egypt is in the northeast coast of Africa. Egypt is here, Sudan is here, and Ethiopia is here.
Okay.
Does that tell you they all work like the Sahel as a combination?
So
The people of Egypt state where they came from. They came from where the Nile, the Egyptians put in the writing, we came from the beginning of the Nile. Egypt is here. This is Egypt. This is Egypt. This is north. This is Egypt, and to the south of Egypt, to the left is Ethiopia.
Okay.
And coming right down the middle is Sudan. So when Professor Munderson tell you about different dynasties, they're all African people from each area ruling. The people from Egypt, the people you associate with Egypt, they tell you where they came from. We came from the beginning of the Nile. The beginning of the Nile is in Ethiopia and Central Africa, where God happy dwells. At the foothills of the mountain of the moon. The mountains of the moon are those sets of mountains that is in Uganda and the Democratic Republic of Congo. So the Egyptians said, we came from the valley, we came from the beginning of the Nile. Ethiopia, Central Africa. We came from the beginning of the Nile, where God happy dwells. Where does God have? At the foothills of the mountains of the moon. The mountains of the moon are those mountains in Uganda and Democratic Republic of Congo. Came from Central Africa. Our oldest origin is from Central Africa, and then you can go from there. So when Munderson reads to you, Professor Munderson, about what this guy said and this professor said, they don't care what they say. That Egyptian told you where they came from. Beginning of the Nile, Ethiopia. Now, the Nile that runs into Egypt, the Nile that runs into Egypt, this is Egypt, this is Sudan, Nubia, right? And over to the left is Ethiopia. There are monsoons in Africa, you know, when the rains come periodically. The water that gets into Egypt comes from the Blue Nile and the White Nile. I always mix them up. 90% of the water that reaches Egypt, it comes from the mountains of Ethiopia. It comes from the mountains of, here's Ethiopia. It comes from the mountains of Ethiopia, runs through Sudan and comes to Egypt. Excuse me, brother. So when Egypt gets its water, it comes from the Blue Nile, from Ethiopia. It's 90% of the water that gets here, and about 10% of the water comes from Central Africa. So when the Ethiopians are beginning to dam up this lake, it's cutting off a lot of supplies from them. So Dr. Ben was just emphasizing, you don't look at Egypt, you look at that northeast corner as interplay between Africans who came from there, okay? So that tells you about what the Egyptians tell you. So what's the oldest is in Central Africa. And what we were trying to do with Professor Allen was he was going to go to Uganda and begin to root out and document what Dr. Ben was saying about the beginning of the Nile.
Blue Nile.
Okay.
It's Ethiopia.
So one of the greatest empires in Africa was not what you call Egypt. It's too bad we're going to get the maps and stuff to blow it up. See this area you now call Egypt? You see Sudan is here?
Yeah.
And you notice that Sudan and Egypt has a border. But Ethiopia doesn't have a border. The water that reaches Egypt has to go through Sudan. The water comes through Sudan from two areas. There's water coming from the rainforest. Most of the major rivers in this part of Africa is in Ethiopia. They're highlands. So the Blue Nile, or the White Nile, y'all correct me, it rains, and then the water comes out of the highlands of Ethiopia, and then it runs down through what the capital of Sudan, and then runs into Egypt, okay? Water also comes from Central Africa, here. But because the waterfall, the rain that hits Central Africa, it's so, the forest is so dense, it soaks up most of the rainfall. So of the water that's reaching Egypt, 10% comes from the rivers that's feeding from the Democratic Republic of Congo. 10% comes up through Sudan and goes to Egypt. 90% comes from Ethiopia, because Ethiopia is highland and it runs off and it's rocky. So the reason that 90% comes from here because of the high altitude rainfall, and it's kind of rocky and it runs off. It rains just as heavily in Central Africa, but the water is absorbed by all the vegetation, okay? So these three areas are all the same people. And they tell you they're the same people. Okay, now let's get to the Vikings. So we went to the Vikings. So the Greeks and the Romans, then the Vikings. So why that's important is because Rome, what you call Rome, predates what you call the Moors. So we're going to go at the end shortly into the big civilization. We had at least 100 major industrial urban areas in Africa. At least 100. They were all destroyed when the Europeans came and said you had nothing. I don't know, and I'll try to find out. There was a, like, you know, the Chinese have that big mountain, they put up that big, what do you call it? The wall. They said we had one bigger than that.
Benin.
In Africa?
Benin had the bigger wall.
Yes.
See? You're talking about the wall of China, but yeah, Benin.
Because
19.
Because that's important, because you see, what you see, how do you know the Moors civilized, industrialized that part of the area? Because you had two, by the time the Moors would come in, you have two groups of white people there, so-called white. The ones who've been there for tens of thousands of years, you call them Celts, you call them Irish and Scots. Those people. And then there were some other people. You notice that Spain, why is Spain, Portugal, and Italy, how come they have their common language? It's not Germanic. You call it Latin. So the major language of that area, which is now Britain, France, is Portugal, Spain, Britain, and France. There was a whole other group of people who you call whatever you want to call them. But they were there with their polytheism. And when you will find that they were agricultural. You know, you farm, you move around, you have a little cattle, that's it. For thousands of years, Egypt, Sudan, Ethiopia, and then we read the other empire, you already built dams, you built buildings, you built massive structures. How do you know? Just look in New York City, you see the copy. So you already have the evidence of the architecture that you see around coming out of Africa, whether it's Egypt or whether it's Sudan, whatever it is. So when the Moors come in, they're going to industrialize Spain. Show them, as Dr. Ben said, they either had to come in and show them to wear underwear so that their ass don't stick to their behind. Their clothes don't stick to their behind. Think. What is it that the Europeans call industrial? The Industrial Revolution had two components. Metalworking. Iron, copper, tin, how to work with metals. And the second one was clothing, cotton, and other things. Because the Europeans, until the Moors got there, were wearing animal skins. And you see the pictures, we'll show you where the Egyptian, the ancient African people, they are all the beautiful clothing they have. You go to Egypt, they're still coming into the museum copying. So you already have the precedent that you could show, as Dr. Clark said, the Arabs didn't build anything in Africa. Because when you look back to where they came from, they didn't build it. They only built when they got there, after copying us and us showing them. So it's important to keep hitting, and we're going to produce it the next time, those groups of human beings you call Germanic are those who are now in Scandinavia, Denmark, and they went and invaded what is now England, Spain, Portugal, and Italy. Mixture of two different white Europeans, if you want to use that term, white Europeans. Okay, so polytheism, we're winding down Romans, so we did the Romans. We did polytheism, we did the Romans and the Greeks, to show you Yoruba. Okay, the last page, just to begin the smattering, as the sister mentioned, that it was in Benin that you had these massive structures. So I'm just going to name a few of the known central areas in Africa, but there were hundreds of thousands. Just like they keep discovering a new, what you call those things, a sarcophagus.
Right.
Dr. Ben said there are thousands up there, because people have been buried for thousands of years. We went into one of the underground burial chambers. And you know the zodiac, that what the god of the river, the one who's fishing. Huh? The zodiac, there are 12 zodiacs, I don't remember them.
Right.
And they move around. If you look at the zodiac position today, in one of the temples, we saw the zodiac in that temple. So the zodiac that you see today, when you look up, there's another set back there. So the set of the zodiac you're seeing, the set that rotated around before, you see it in there. So you see the procession. You have to go to Egypt just to get a taste of what your ancestors did. But like she said, Benin and the rest of them, they destroyed 100 of our cities. They leveled it. Just like they did here, they killed down all the mounds that the indigenous people here. They wanted to erase you. Now, if you got a group of white people, and most of the people in Europe today that run Germany, that run UK or Britain, that run Spain and Portugal, those are the Germanic part. There are two types of white people in Europe. Those groups of white people, we give the name, and then you had another set that came down in the vein. You remember when the Roman Empire, we'll get into it, the Germanic tribes came down and destroyed Rome. Was destroyed. Rome, those people in Rome with the Latin, the French, what you call the French, the Spanish and the Portuguese, that language group is related to Latin. But the British, that English we speak, is related to the German form. So most of the white people who are now running Australia, Canada, United States, Germany, the United States, Germany, and England, they're all the Germanic invaders. They're not the original white people there. That's why you have two major language groups in Europe. You have the Germanic group, and then you have the Latin group. The Latin group is Portugal, Spain, Italy, and some of Portugal, Spain, Italy, and some of France.
The sarcophagus, they call it the Dendera.
Yeah, I don't know the particular name, but the most important part is the concept.
That's not the
Okay.
right.
Okay, so let's end this portion dealing with some of the African civilizations that you can find in the textbooks and other places. And they don't list even this. Numidia, which is now Algeria, Tunisia, and Libya. 3 BC to 1 AD. So you had a group of cute Africans living along this area called Numidia. So with 2,000, 2,500, you're talking 3,000 years ago. That's one group where we were here. Then you have the ancient Carthage, North Africa, along here. Carthage was that civilization that the Romans kept fighting. Why did they want to knock off the Carthage? Carthage was here with Hannibal, right in North Africa. Why? Because if you could get to North Africa, the gold, the trade was here, the salt trade, the food trade, there was no desert here. And when you see pictures of Rome that cut this? Most of the food that fed Rome came from the northern part of Africa. This was the breadbasket of Rome. This northern part, the Roman Empire circled like this. And the biggest one they got here. So that's why they were fighting Carthage. Carthage for the food, Carthage for the pathway to take. You see, when you look at the Silk Road, whoever writes the Silk Road always tells you the Silk Road ran from China. It went along some land routes here. It went along some land routes here. And then it ended into Egypt. The Chinese and Asians had something to trade. It didn't end in Europe. Europe at this time of the Silk Road between China was between China and the northern part of Africa. You had agriculture, you had food, you had minerals, you had everything. The Europeans at the time the Silk Trade was here was still living with animal skins, no underwear. So they drive the Silk Road as if to say, oh, the Chinese and them were dealing with the Europeans. They weren't dealing with no damn Europeans. These people were in the ice here, still in the ice here. So that Silk Trade ran through here. And there was a land bridge between what you call Egypt and this other part of Asia, right? It was always a land bridge until the French and the English, using African labor and skills, made the Suez Canal, right? The Suez Canal cut a little chink in here. Before the Suez Canal there, you could always cross from Egypt into Asia for thousands of years. It's a fantasy that he had to split the Red Sea. It's a joke. They didn't know the geography. So right here, so the Silk Trade was here. But guess what? Most of the Silk Trade did not go by land. Let me ask you a question. If you all, Ray, any one of you, if you got a truck, you have a company, you want to move goods, how can you move a massive amount of goods? With trucks or with railroads? Which can carry much more cargo? Railroads, right?
Faster and more.
The massive amount of railroad. So while they were moving things here, how would you move things here? You had to move them through camels mainly. Mainly camels. Through here.
Landmass.
That landmass. So what other mechanism did the Asians have? So the Silk Trade went from in China to Africa. Africa was trading with this northern part. They ain't trading no damn Europeans. They were still in the caves. So if you traded through here, what's a quicker way to move goods, and you can move them in massive bulk? To put them on what?
The water of the...
What would you put it on at this time? Where do most of the trade in the world? When China, Russia, Africa, when they move how do you move most things between one country and the world? You use water, right? And what do you put on the water? Ships, cargo ships. Huh?
Yes.
So most of the Silk Trade the volume was not along China and all of this road. You know how long it take you to cross? Plus there's a big mountain area you can't cross. That's why China did it, they had to go get. These are all mountains. So you got to move material from the area you call China, cover 4,000 miles with camels in the sand.
That's slow.
And slow as hell. So what did most of the trade from China, where did it go? It went from China and take it over to this part of India and put it on large ships. Okay? Most of the Silk Road, those ships were, water's easy, right? So you take the ships down, come down around India, and you're trading with mainly Africans. Africans got everything. So that Silk Road went from here. When you see a map of China, we gave it to you. This third of China, this part of China is all mountains. That's why when you look at the population of China, 90% of the Chinese people live You cut China into 3 parts. 1 and these 2. This part of China is mountains. Only this third here is 95% of the population because it's more flat and it has the rivers, okay? So the Silk Road didn't go over no damn mountains. The Silk Road went down, cut across here. Most of what they did was they put it on ships, moved the ships around, and they traded with mostly Africans. Africans had everything. The same thing that we supply, food, material, everything. So if you're bringing the ships here, what part of Africa did the Asians trade with? The west part of Africa, or they traded with the east part? The east, right? So most of the silk, most of the cargo between China or India went along. They put it on a boat. They come down here. You offload it depending upon where you're going. Whether you're going to take it here, whether you're going to take it here. Now, if you wanted to get it up to Egypt, you would take it in through what? Through this area. Through that area into the Red Sea. In other words, cinnamon, what you call those here? Cinnamon sticks.
Bark.
The cinnamon sticks came mainly from where? India. So Africa is using cinnamon stick. Where did they get the cinnamon? From this part here. And you trade it so that the Silk Road was, most of the trade was from China. I wasn't there. But you can look at the geography. Let's say they made this stuff here. You look at a map of China, and you will find that it is this eastern third, where all the rivers lay down, where it's flat, it's grassland, and you get your food from. You look at 2/3 of India, China this way, it's mountains. China's population, 90% is located here, and only a small percent is here. So you know most of the massive trade had to go by boat. And in order for China to get to boat, you would have to take it through the Indian Ocean, go through the Malacca Straits, and come here. You wouldn't go through the Malacca Straits, you would just bring it through the port and put it on ships. Then those ships would go here, and you trade wherever it was. Okay? So the Silk Road trade was between China and whoever else was so-called there, and the Africans.
East African.
Okay? Now, the reason that's important is this. Most of the trade in Africa by the Europeans was on which coast? The West Coast, right? Because you're close to the Europeans.
That's where the lands come from.
The Europeans came out of the damn caves. So they came in, so most of the trade, most of the east coast, west coast of Africa, yeah, the Arabs went in. Look, we're going to go through the Arabs went in from the desert. They invaded the northern part of Africa. They invaded Turkey. They equally invaded Europe. The Arabs will come all the way through here, come through Spain, and kidnap people in Britain. So when they say the Arab trade, oh, they went in and they messed up Africa. Well, why don't they tell you that the Arabs went in equally to this area and equally the Europeans couldn't defend themselves? Yes, they came in, killed us, stole from us, enslaved us. Because when you go to Egypt, you'll see many of the mosques was made with stone. And when you look at the stone, you will notice that that stone had a carving of the African god or goddess. Where did the people who live in the damn desert get the stone from? They didn't know how to work stone. If you look at the pictures of the big pyramid, the big one, you'll notice that you see stone on the top and all below the bottom, you see that empty. Who took the stones away? The Arabs. The stones on the pyramid, when you look at the pyramid, the big one, they took the stones and made their mosque. They copied. So that's how you know. You're coming out of the desert. Nomadic people. Not used to farming. By the time history turned out and they began to flood out, they flooded on us, they came into Egypt, They came into Sudan. They came, the northern part they hit. Okay? But they all, the white people don't tell you, they equally went and was in this area, conquering these so-called Europeans. And here, Italy, they even had raids in Britain. So the Arabs wasn't just running through Africa, they were running through Europe. Europeans were, yeah, they don't tell you about that. So, the trade. Now the reason that's important, so you see, most of our contact with the Europeans was on the West Coast, because they were close, right? Mm-hmm. The Arabs, the few, when they got into this part of Africa because they crossed the bridge. They crossed the land, they came because of proximity. Mm-hmm. So the last 400 years, to this day, the white people from Europe, I'm talking about the World Economic Forum, okay, who tell you that they are a private NGO of all ruling class people of these countries. Australia, Canada, US, UK, France, Germany. Only the white people who are colonizers, right? Mm-hmm. Who got super rich off of ripping us off and ripping everybody else off. They're grouped together now because the world is changing so much. We got to group ourselves together to fight off the non-white people. So they tell you the only one who can join the World Health or World Economic Forum, you got to be white and the ruling class. The ruling class are white men in each of these countries who determine the foreign and domestic policy of that country. Forget the Democrats, Republicans, and rest. One bullet.
So it's the rich white men.
Okay, so what we're doing here is the reason they don't teach geography or history to anybody, because they don't want you to understand what is coming. So let me ask a question. So now that the Africans along here, most of the Africans are doing basic things. They're no longer shipping out their raw material. They're holding it. Mm-hmm. And they're beginning to industrialize. Mm-hmm. So there are 8 things that Europe, without Africa, Europe is dead. 8 things that Europe get from Africa today. 8 things that China get from Africa today. If you cut them off, Europe will collapse. If you cut off China, China would go down severely. One of the 8 things that has been constantly stolen from us by Europeans, and now Chinese are trading with us, they gotta have oil,
and wood, coal,
gas, oil, gas, wood, and coal. You notice those are 4 things that provide heat. Without heat, you can't industrialize, do a damn thing. That's what all industrial countries run on. Energy. Oil and gas, coal and wood. That's what they've been getting out of Africa. The other 4 things that Europe gets from Africa and China gets is food. You have 65% of the arable land. You feed Europe. You feed China. But they got to lie about what it is. Food, fertilizer. Minerals, iron, copper, tin, cobalt. After World War I, after World War II, who rebuilt Europe? US, right? What they call that program? The program, the Marshall Plan, right? Rebuilt Europe. How did Japan get rebuilt? because South Korea, Taiwan, and Japan, and Europe came under US's control. How do you build? How do you renovate a building? You got to have what to renovate a building? Where did copper come from? Africa. Where did iron come from? Africa. Where's the rocks and stones come from? Africa. Where's the cobalt come from? Africa. Every damn thing that United States corporation used, just like here, they rebuilt Europe, they rebuilt Japan, they rebuilt South Korea and Taiwan. None of these countries have any of these resources. So you remember the white man raising hell that all of the wealth that United States and Europe have been living so well in the last 40 years, they're going to lose it because of BRICS. They're panicking. It all comes out because of that. The United States could not rebuild. You go to any country to rebuild. It's stones, cement, wood, all of that. And this is what the Africans are beginning to cut off. No longer are you going to get our raw materials. We're going to refine it, we're going to industrialize. So that's the big thing there in that terms. So even though we start with polytheism, that's important to know that you gave the world Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. It came out of Africa. From the first traces, it worked its way into Rome. It worked its way into what you call Greece. And now, that religion, that Christianity, most of the Europeans, all the Europeans who are Christian, they got it from you. That's why you can't talk about this, because you realize that without Africa, you don't have anything. So that's tying in the polytheism, is to show you that human beings practice reality. We need a goddess to help birth. We need a goddess, the female goddess. I'm trying to get a list. Monday should probably have female goddess who came down to help you during pregnancy, to help you take care of babies. The things that you do every damn day, that's what the gods did for you. You're going to feed your family, you're going to go to work, you're going to shovel the coal, whatever you're going to do. That's what those gods do. And what your activity is, you're polytheistic. That's the concept of why we start the polytheism. And then when we finalize in a few minutes some of the major areas that we had in Africa. We had so-called they call it civilization. Can you imagine Egypt, Sudan, and Ethiopia as a massive power block? That combination was bigger than all of Europe. You see, when they say Europe, they're talking about all of those countries that you see on the map that are Europe. But that part of Russia, up to the Ural Mountains, in other words, there's a set of mountains. Somebody named the Ural Mountains, okay? Just concepts. That cutoff point, Europe is really a segment of Asia. But let's give them it as a continent. Right now, all of those countries, white European countries, Western European, Eastern European, they're in Europe. But the part of the area of Asia, up to the Ural Mountains, Russia is in Europe. In fact, Russia comprises 40% of Europe. And one of the reasons that the Europeans have so much trouble with Russia is because they've been trying to steal what Russia got. Russia is like a mini, M-I-N-I, a small version of Africa. Massive area with a vast amount of natural resources, water, wood, everything Africa got, Russia got at least a little above it. The geology, because they got so much area. And that's why when we reread it, the same way these Western Europeans lived off of these indigenous people. So if you review, the white Anglos, the white Germanic people from the north who will come down and we'll deal with those other human beings living in the southern part, which is England, it is Portugal, it is Spain, and Italy. They were invaded by a Germanic portion of it. That Germanic group of people that went down and conquered that part of Southeast Europe, they're the ones who now control Australia, Canada, United States, England, those five, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, US, and England. They call themselves the Five Eyes. We the five cousins. So these are concepts.
What are they again, those five?
It's Australia, New Zealand, Canada, the USA, and Britain, UK. They all derive their origins primarily from the Germanic portions of them. They're not Celts, they're not Irish, and they're not Wales. Irish, Celts, and Wales are names of human beings that were there before the Germanic group came in. Now, before we read the names and finish up of some of the massive areas in Africa where we had cities, it wasn't just a few villages. You had, as she's saying, from Benin. We had massive structures, so we're going to read it. But one of the things that I want to point out to you, so you'll see what's coming. Now that the United States and Europe have basically lost control of the ability to steal out of Africa, they're going down. But it was West Africa that we suffered most from this group of European people, right? English, French, Spain, Portugal, and the Dutch.
Because they were so close.
That because it was close.
Territorial.
Right. So, but because we are holding our natural resources, industrializing, this area is going to go down fast. And because the United States has been stealing primarily from Africa, they're going down with it. Part of what you see in the United States is part of the decline. Now, where is most of the world trade? What two areas in the future have the most people and the most natural resources and the most industrial base? Is it this area? It's Africa, and Asia. Right now, most of the industrialization, most of the manufacturing is located in India, China, Russia, and some of these Asian countries, okay? So your major producers is China, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, and some of these other countries. So the massive amount of industrialization was concentrated in Europe and America because they got it out of Africa. They brought us here, we farmed, we made most of the inventions, so we built, Africans built the structure of Europe and the United States. But now that the theft is over, and they're putting themselves together, let's assume, which it is assumption, and it's fact, that the theft is ending, right? Who has the population and the industrialization now? Asia. Asia, the main industrial area, 1900. Remember we went through China? China went through a civil war. You see, you have to look at the different pieces. China I think we presented it, went through a civil war, and finally, in 1949, World War I ended, World War II ended. And China had a civil war. You had the so-called communist Mao Zedong backed by Russia, and you had Chiang Kai-shek backed by the United States and the West. They had, after World War II was over, after they got rid of the Japanese, 1900, there was a civil war in China between the communist China, Mao Zedong, and the nationalists. Nationalists are those Chinese backed by Europe and the United States. They had a fighting over the land. They fought over land, but World War II hit. 1939, Japan invaded China, Manchuria, and came down.
That's right.
So the two Chinas, the communists and the nationalists said, look, we got to suspend fighting each other to see who's going to control, to get rid of the Japanese, right? So finally, when Japan was defeated, communist China, backed by Russia, they resumed the civil war around 1945. They fought the battle between 45 and 49. Mao Zedong, backed by China, backed by Russia, and Chiang Kai-shek, the nationalist, backed by the United States, England, and France. Because remember the Opium War 1 and 2? Mm-hmm. Opium War 1, 1840, Opium War 2, Opium War 1, the British and the United States was in on China, breaking down their society,
giving them that dough.
The drug, breaking them down, right? Then there was a second Opium War, 10 or 15 years later. So the U.S., its cousin, United States, and Germany and France added to it, breaking down China. So you got United States, France, and UK, Britain, in China, breaking it down, selling drugs, destroying the place from 1850.
Sound familiar?
Okay? And so, after that, the war, then they had the Civil War. So, 1949, the Civil War ended.
Is there a 5 opium wars?
You got to look it up, like 1840 and then 1860. They were selling the opium, breaking down the society. The same way they break down this society. You want to know, as Professor Dr. McIntyre said, and he's battling. This is what they do. Yeah. You can't expect them to do it. And the reason they're intensifying it is because
they're on the run.
Huh?
They losing.
They're on the run. They're losing. There was a survey up. They're saying, white people are saying, that 80 or 90% of Americans, I ain't talking about you, feel now they're not going to be able to buy a home. Not 80 or 90% of Americans, not us, feel like they ain't going no place. And they want to think about going someplace that's better. Okay? You think you got problems as African people. At least we know who we are, basically. We still holding together. How do you know? Because if we weren't holding together, basically, with the onslaught, they wouldn't have to do this. So this is intensifying. If I could just find out, going around and you putting together, they say 80 or 90%, 80% of the people of America, they talk to white people, it's over. When I was 1970, I always tell people, 1970, I was born in 44, United States had 70% of the global trade.
Big dogs.
Big dogs. You know what percentage of global trade they got? 2%.
Ain't a factory in sight.
And when your friend Trump put the tariff on China,
My friend.
the Japanese and China, you know what they did?
The Don.
They stopped buying the U.S. Treasury. In other words, I have a credit card. I'm in so much debt that I gotta keep having one. I gotta keep somebody giving me the credit to keep my credit going.
Still for people to pay for. But they owe China trillions.
Well, the Chinese have a debt and Japanese have a debt of China. They've got Japan, they say $1 trillion, and China 8. The Japanese said to the banks, don't buy any more treasury notes. Sell. Now, you know what that means? If you got 2 credit cards and you've been functioning on these credit cards, that's what the United States been functioning on. Their wealth didn't come from manufacturing. It's killing, theft, and everybody having to use the dollar. So if you don't use that dollar, it's like me having 2 credit cards, and I start arguing with one of the banks. They said, cut his credit card. What the hell you think going to happen? I'm in big trouble. The United States is surviving on the fact that people keep buying these treasury notes and putting money in. That's like renewing the credit. So if China says to the banks, sell. That's like you going home and say, damn, you know, they cut one of the credit cards when you know you can't live with one credit card. Then Trump backed up. That's why he took them tariffs. Somebody pick up the phone and say, yeah, you better stop this. Because the bond market, they don't wait like me and you for our check. They see China is selling, Japan is selling, they panic. Because they got their money in all of these, they're gambling. If there's 1% trade, they're going to lose this. These people are wealthy on the damn paper. Okay, so they come to Trump, he had it wrong. Then China told the United States, I'm not going to send you any more rare earth metals. Rare earth metals are metals and minerals that have special properties, like heat resistance.
Copper?
Copper is not quite a trace, but like cobalt is kind of a trace metal. But the real trace metal, tungsten like that, and things you ain't even heard of. Beryllium and stuff. They're in such small quantities. But they're critical because they're very resistant to heat. They have powerful magnets. And then these are the kind of things you need to put in cars, and you need to put in trucks, and you need to put in your rockets. Cell phones. That's trace metals. You can look up trace metals and they give you about 20 or 30 names you ain't never heard of. But these are metals. What China has been doing is digging up the trace metal and then manufacturing. So it's like a dope deal. He got control of 90% of heroin. He said, don't bother me, I won't release it. It's that bad. So anyhow, they got it. China said, you ain't gonna be able to make your rockets and stuff in about 2 months.
Because we're gonna stop there.
So the point that I'm making is that United States is like an average person who's living a lifestyle with 3 credit cards. If the credit company doesn't renew it, you're in big trouble. If Japan and China doesn't buy the treasury notes, country's gone, because the United States got nothing to fall back on. They don't make anything. And if you're now in the United States of America, all of the wealth that's been propagated, the few rich got it stuck here, and they got it stored all over. It's the hell with you.
Your food in the Caribbean. No fruits.
If you only got 2% of the world's population, 2% of the world's wealth, he makes all these tariffs. Now, they froze, United States and Europe froze $300 billion of Russian money. Just said, I'm taking it. You got $30,000 in the bank, and they just tell you, I ain't giving it to you. What you gonna do? Are you gonna put any more in? Ain't putting no more in, right? So now, a lot of countries said, when they went into, what's this? It's Northern Africa. Libya, they stole all Libya's gold and all of Libya's silver. And they cut off the pipe so they can, they froze, what you call these people, Venezuela, they froze his money. And then, what's that company that Venezuela owns? Costco, what's it called?
Citgo Gas.
It's owned by Venezuela. Not anymore. They seized it. What's Venezuela going to do?
Stop
You
supplying us.
So nobody is going to
Is
mingle.
Venezuela, you go shop?
Yeah.
He's gone.
Yeah, he's gone, but I'm just saying, because they can't steal that oil. The point is, people are now withdrawing their oil, the gold, and nobody going to lend. Why would you lend if they get mad at you, they freeze it? And you can't trust the United States.
Exactly.
Okay? So this is part of this. If they could be stealing like they used to steal, I'm not going to do it. If they could steal like they used to steal it, they wouldn't have to worry about it.
Well, they can't do that anymore.
You can't steal. Terror and rest them say it's over. You ain't stealing. We industrialized. We got this one helping that. It's critical.
We make our own stuff.
Okay? So, now where most of the greatest center of manufacturing right now is in Asia. China, South Korea, Japan, and some of these other countries. Because United States and Europe took all of their industrial base and put it into China and Asia for cheap labor.
NAFTA, GATT.
Cheap labor and massive profits. So now it's left, the United States is not only left surviving off people buying their treasury notes and the gun. That's how they've been functioning. But who are you going to put the gun to anymore? You can forget that. And look, United States, China's bad. What's the name? Japan and South Korea are allies with United States. They were taken over by the United States, right? They were colonies of the United States. They backed the United States.
Yeah.
Now guess what? Russia, China, South Korea, and Japan, what did they just do? They got together and they said, look, we gotta hook up. Because the white man ain't got too much going. You think if you and I don't know the ramifications of the fact that the Sahel deprived France of just uranium and how that devastated the electricity in Europe. You know what it is? You can't make anything unless you have something with energy. And the French was using the uranium from Nigeria. 90% of their country, 70 to 80% of their country run off that uranium. They were selling the uranium and electricity to Germany and Britain. So they know. Now, you know, we jumping around with, President Traore.
Right.
Did you know the letter Putin sent him about inviting him to the parade in May the 9th? Every year, for the last 30 or 40 years, the Russians on May the 9th have a massive celebration throughout the country, and the biggest one is in Moscow, where Putin gets with all of the leaders, all of the Japanese, all of the heroes and the heroines who fought the war. They're celebrating the defeat of Germany. They lost, they say, 29 million dead. Almost every family lost somebody. See, Russia only has about 25 million people, and now they lost a lot. So they celebrate every May the 9th. Massive celebration. And most of the countries from Asia, they send delegates. Most of the countries from Africa, they send delegates. Vanuatu sends delegates. So it's a big, I'm with you. Putin is on the stage with all of the big heroes. Who's going to be on one side of, standing there on one side of Putin?
Terrari?
The big guy from China. What's his name?
Okay.
He's going to be on one side of Putin. And who did he invite to be on the other side for the world to see?
Terrari.
Say that again?
Shahadi.
Say it again?
Shahadi.
So what message? Remember we had the picture of Theodore Roosevelt on the horse with the African below him on the left and the indigenous? That's a symbol to the world. We white people run this place. The Indian, indigenous, and Africans are subordinate to me. Dress them in rags. Now they took that statue away because then people were raising hell about your racism. Now when Putin is standing on that stage with the head of China on one and Traore on the other, what message is that giving to the world?
They're coming together.
Say that again?
It's over.
They're coming together.
You hear what the young people here are saying? It's over.
It's over now.
The president of a small African country, because Traore represents
Chickens have come home to
that Pan-Africanism that all our ancestors have been battling for, some of which were assassinated. But he is at the symbol to say, look, this who's running Africa now. We're African. You're male. Not that male run everything, because remember, every war, the people are saying, when they were fighting with the Europeans, they're fighting with America and the Europeans, and the men are on the front line fighting. What the women doing? They're minding the children. What the women are doing? They're cooking the food. What the women are doing? Loading the ammunition. You can't fight a war without logistics, right? That's what the women were doing. Logistics.
taking care of the wounded.
You taking care of, there is no more effort without logistics. Logistics is supplies, right? So it isn't a matter of the men fighting and the women. If you don't have that combination, then the ball game is over, okay? So what that's now saying is that because Traore, what did he do? Those three Sahel nations, they made a coup. They got rid of the leader who was not helping the people. If you're a leader, you gotta help them. They immediately formed a confederation, a union, for their mutual protection. They got rid of the European, white, English, French, German, get the hell out of here. They got rid of them. Then they went to Russia and China and got arms, weapons. Because if you don't have security, the ball game is over. And they have made other changes. They now are asking countries to work with them as partners to help industrialize the country and to move on. So because President Traore is in union with Mali and Niger, they form a strong union to show Africa. If you join together, join your armies together, go out and seek help from countries who are willing to help you, to train you, to arm you, to protect you. In China, Africa got so much of everything. They just discovered that Burkina Faso had vast amounts of oil. All African countries got some of everything.
Is Chad with
So China,
Is Chad with Niger and
yeah, the Chad, Nigeria is not in it.
what?
The Sahel nations,
Niger.
the Sahel nations, the three Sahel nations that joined together in the union is Mali, Niger,
And Chad.
and Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, right?
Burkina Faso.
Chad is part of it. Chad didn't sign up officially yet, but it's joined, it's functioning as a union. Senegal didn't sign up yet, but it's functioning. Even Ghana didn't officially join, but they're all collaborating with the Sahel to do railroads, roads, gas lines. So you now have Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali officially in, Chad is in, and Senegal. So the Sahel is here. And then when Sudan finishes with its civil war, they coming in. The Eritrea is coming in, Malaysia. This area is bigger than the United States. So Traore is the Dr. Ben, Dr. Clark, Shashi McIntyre, all of the people who have been battling for our survival. He's all in one. He's young, he's African, he wear the military. Why does he wear the military? To let you know that's how you have to protect yourself. Military. And then they're industrializing the country. And now they are an example to the other African countries that you can industrialize. You don't have to go to the IMF and World Bank to get into a debt loan.
Do you have choices?
Nigeria says to Russia, I have some of the richest deposits of uranium in the world, highly refined. Russia said, I'll gladly help to industrialize you. I can use some of the uranium. Nigeria, especially in Mali and Nigeria, but Burkina Faso, with the weapons, drones, helicopters, jet fighters, and the help from Russia, they have taken over. When they made the coup, 80% of each of these countries was under the control of the jihadis. Okay? After the United States and Europe killed Gaddafi, they took the weapons that Gaddafi had and they added, and they put those jihadists there to cause trouble. So those jihadists, those people who have been raiding in the Sahel, were put there by the United States. They admit that. Same jihadists they use against Syria. The same one they use against Russia. So because of the help of Russia and China and I can't think of the other name, and the other countries, they have a strong military now, a union. They have a crack force of 55,000, plus they're building up their arms. They have these drones. They have helicopters, they have jet fighters, they have satellites. They only had control over maybe 40%, but they retook most of the land. And that land that they didn't control was controlled by the jihadists and France stealing the gold. So when you got armed and you took over that area, you got control of the gold, and now they're mining the gold and they're making gold bars. They say most of the gold that is brought on the international market illegally was taken out of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Nigeria. That's why those jihadists was there, controlling that area. So the French and the United States, they were stealing the gold. So now the weapons they brought up, they controlled it. You know, you take it here, it's like, let's say you had an army and you were living in Brooklyn, and they were stealing you blind. And then you drove out whoever it was, and now you're doing it. You understand what happened? After they armed themselves and got their drones and everything, they were able to retake at least 90% of the land and brought those major gold areas where the jihadists were put there with the United States, they were stealing. So when they armed themselves, got rid of the jihadists, drove them back, they're mining the gold. So now, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Nigeria, instead of having to go to IMF and World Bank, it's like us going to any of these banks and then they lock you down in credit. Can't get out. Student loan, they lock down in credit. See, Trump can start a business. Go out and get restarted. Go out, get restarted. Go out, but the students, they lock you down to loans and they don't give you a chance. So the first time Trump was in, he did what the other presidents do. He signed off on a $4 trillion tax relief
For the big boys.
for the richest corporations and the richest people. So that $4 trillion could have taken all of the students out of the student loan, could have wiped out all our credit cards. But it isn't about you. It's about them.
The autocrats.
It's about you living in a feudalistic society where everything goes up on top. So that's why the United States can't function anymore now that the United States can't go around stealing, And now that they can't get what they want because nobody's using the dollars. The country's in very bad shape for trading. They had it, but they squandered it. White Europeans never made anything that had shit. That's why they didn't know what they had. We got all these natural resources. We're stealing out of Africa. We got this industrial base that we built up. You had the largest industrial base, making 70% of the world's goods in 1970 and 1920. How much? That's 30 years? You're a poor country. They're asking the Chinese to repair the Golden Gate Bridge. So it's what they call a country that got and don't have a pot to piss in. That's what you're facing. And Trump thinks he's going to just tell everybody, I'm going to rip you off. They say, are you kidding?
Is that what the tariffs are about with China?
So the point that I'm making here is, or we're making, is that you have a fundamental change because BRICS is a threat. Now, based upon the time, we're going to read the major, we're finishing up officially here. The major, okay, Numidia, North Africa. Ancient Carthage, that Rome was always fighting. Egypt, Sudan, and Ethiopia. This massive area, bigger than the United States. Assam, Ethiopia. Assum, 1st century Ethiopia. Punt, Somalia. Over here, Ghana. The civilization of Ghana. The civilization of Mali. Songhai. Cain, Benin, Chad, Nigeria. This whole area was once a major bloc. Kingdom of Benin, Nigeria. The Soa civilization, Lake Chad. Kingdom of Zimbabwe. Kingdom of Mapunga. Kingdom of Eswatini. Swahili land. Blue and white now. In other words, basically, these names, there was major empires all through Africa that lasted 300 years, 600 years, 800 years. The whole continent was industrialized one time or another. So when the Europeans came in, we had lost a lot from the Arab slave trade, but still we had a lot. So the conclusive part of this presentation is that most of the world had a polytheistic concept of how to live, and most of the world still are polytheistic because they're dealing with the reality that their gods represent their reality. You need somebody to help you when you're sick. There's a God to help you for sickness, this type of sickness, a God to help you to cut wood. Practical things. Not just going to a church and give the priest some money and you get nothing out of it. Or synagogue and you get nothing out of it. Okay, so Ray, given your time, we need comments, questions, and answers, or comments to it. And what it is that we may, as a unit here, want to discuss. Give reference to something even that is contemporary, like economy.
Like the devil in Somalia.
Say what you got to say now. You got the time.
Any questions from the Zoom? Zoom audience, any questions?
Okay, that's good. Young ladies who are here, you have anything to say, add to it? You got to talk now. You got to get this. Everybody's got to contribute.
Somalia may have had at least 30 billion barrels of oil and gas reserves. So that would be why April 1st, 2025, he sent the military in there to Somalia.
What is it that the Europeans, especially the United States, what are they desperate? They can't function without the natural resources, the oil, the wood, the rubber, everything is coming from Africa. You fought these wars, you got most of the rubber out of Liberia and that Western. They can't survive. Do you think they give us these terrible names? And you think that series that Dr. McIntosh is dealing with, why do you think they have to try to project? They took that series because it represented an intact family. The father, the mother, the older sister, older daughter, and the two is an intact family that function normally with the circumstances of the thing. Okay, what were you going to say? Gotta say it now.
And Clinton also had went in there, and they made a movie. You know, they brag about their nonsense. It's called Black Hawk Down. They call it the Battle of Mogadishu.
Yeah.
That's some devils in Somalia.
Yeah, when they shot the
I refused to watch the movie, but now I know the significance.
Yeah, see, you tie it together. The Africans talking about the UN, we're going to get to the UN because that's all part of it. The UN was put together by the United States and Britain. The founding members of the United Nations is United States, Britain, France, the Soviet Union, and Chiang Kai-shek. Okay? The United States, England, and France, all white colonies. We got to get this together and form a political club to see how we can control. So that's what the United Nations was put there for, to politically control non-white people. The United States military and NATO was supposed to economically control non-white people or to retain their colonies. And the IMF and World Bank and all that was economic, to keep sucking the non-white countries to keep your high standard of living. That's what it was done. So when you look up the United Nations, the founding members, the United States, Britain, and France, they put in communists, they put in nationalist China. Nationalist China was the Chinese people who are puppets of the United States. In the Soviet Union, which is Russia. Russia didn't put it together, Russia never signed on as the founding member. So the United Nations were put together by the United States, Britain, and France to control the world, to try to keep control of their colonies. They all had colonies. And they all were living good on somebody else's land. That's why they put the United Nations there. And when you look up the United Nations, you will see that they have, I think it's about 15 different divisions of activity that the world is supposed to function in. 3 of them that I remember was the World Bank and IMF. Is one of the units of the UN. Who's controlling it? The United States and Europeans. Another major, think of 17 functioning units who carry out the work, who actually do the work of the UN. IMF and World Bank is one of the 13. I gotta look it up, you can look it up also. That's to lock down the non-white people and all of these long debt.
Okay, we got a question. All right, so go ahead, Zoom. Tone, go ahead, ask Doc. Tone, T-O-N, ask Doc, what's going on? Ask your question.
Yes, good night, brothers. Thank you for the knowledge and the sharing. I really wanted to know, you're sharing great information about our great Moorish history, but how can we get together and start building this nation together as a melanated people?
What nation? Be specific about where you want to physically build this nation you're talking about. I agree, but be specific.
Working together.
Where? What part of the world are you talking about? Building a nation?
I'm talking about here in America.
Okay.
Yep.
Now, what do you want us to do? What do you want us to do?
to get together? How can we get together as a people and work together to bring back our great nation in America?
I've gotta start shopping at the Rock.
Okay.
13502.
I understand your question, but I don't understand the level upon
That's for
which.
next time. Maybe for next time, but just to think about it.
Yeah, okay, I can give you three quick examples. After the Civil War, the African population divided into 3 areas. Half of us was caught and couldn't escape sharecropping, so we stayed as slaves, officially. A quarter of us was given lands all along the East Coast. From North Carolina, South Carolina, we were given land to do our own farming. 1848, 66, after the Civil War. What happened to all of that quarter of the African population that had land on the eastern coast? Gone. They took it back. So half of us got caught. They held us down on the on the plantation as sharecropping. You heard the 30-something amendment that slavery shall be ended in the area of the United States, except if a person is found guilty of a felony. And when you find guilty of a felony, you lose a day and a year. A year and a day, you lose your citizenship, you revert back to slavery. So all of those African people who was brought to trial by white people, and we were convicted of a felony, they put us back in the chain gang. So they put in that amendment that slavery shall be abolished in the United States except if you are a felon. So they kept half of us still enslaved. You know the history of white, what they call Black Wall Street. That happened to hundreds and hundreds of us. That other quarter of us who left the South and who weren't caught in the South on plantation, we went all over. And we built our cities and communities. Black Wall Street, what did they do? They destroyed it. So you already had an example of white people who say, I'm not going to lose the most valuable, the 2 issues that the white slave owners, when they did the Constitutional Convention, the 2 issues they dealt with, one of security. How do we unify ourselves to protect us from Great Britain? And the second was the economy. Who was the economy? The economy of the United States was slavery. So the 2 elements that your Constitution deals with is 1, security from Britain. 2nd, keeping African people enslaved. Your economy was African people. They demonstrated to you that you are perpetual captive people, and as long as you're here, you're going to be kept to that status.
And if you want to start on anything, the UNIA is the first start. They have their own store, and that's the start. Garvey did it before. They're still doing something. We have the meetings. So the UNIA, if you feel you want to get with a group of people where they go and race first, you start with the UNIA. And here go a picture of it. You deal with Semotap, with Dr. Mack, and you will meet members of the UNIA. And this way, where you say you want to start something in America, where no outsiders, you start with the UNIA. And here go the flyer, and that's a start.
Yes.
This is one of the biggest conflicts and problems we have, but if you want to start, you start there, and you start here. Thank you for coming on, because it's a start, and we have to start somewhere. Dr. Lewis will finish. Any other questions?
May I add a little amendment? The area under the control of the Soviet Union, which is now Russia. You go on a map and you look at Russia, the size of Russia. The United States is about 3 million square miles. Russia is about 7 or 8 million square miles. A vast area. The Russian government right now is run by human beings who you would identify as white. In Russia, they have about 20 distinct ethnic non-white people living within the borders of Russia. The white Russians control the international structure of that nation. So you got a vast area. You have at least 20 different distinct people, like you, all living under the guise of white Russia. In every one of those 20 districts, each distinct group, the Arabs here, the Chinese here, each distinct group has their own state. You got 20 states, you got 50 here. All 50 states in the United States is under one union, and the government of the United States tells that state, every one of the states, what to do. In Russia, those 20 different states are distinct units with their own culture. They have their own people who run it. So you have at least 20 distinct groups living in Russia who are totally independent. And white Russia doesn't bother them anything. They're secure trade. Then what you asking for, the Russians have given to at least 20 distinct groups that's under the umbrella, and they don't interfere with them. When the Muslims or somebody recently asked the United States, would you give us 5 distinct states? And others asked 5 distinct states. We do what we want as African people. We're independent. We will come under the United States military, but you have nothing to do with us. White Russia does not do anything, has anything to do with how those distinct 20 groups run themselves. The United States says no. You asked for it. They said no. You tried. They said no. What Ray is telling you is good. Understand the past history. They have denied the request. And they showed that after the Civil War, when many of us broke out of it, they said, no. Why did they destroy all your cities and stuff? Because they didn't want you to be functioning independent as an African people, working for African people, because you will produce for us. They wanted your skill to be used and controlled by white people. The white Americans is no different than the French or anybody else. They killed us by the millions. And the history shows they're not going to give it to you. But as Ray said, you don't stop the fight. You keep working. We're not giving up, but we got to understand there's a certain reality here. And that's why they make these cartoons that Dr. McIntosh and others are fighting against. They're making it because they want to try to present the African family as so disunified and so irritated. Why? Because we are unified. We are having babies. We do stick together despite everything. And why all of a sudden they have to have this onslaught to produce to make us look like buffoons? Because things are getting tight.
And if you want to also get into an organization where it's all black, you got Iroko, Fomi. Iroko Fomi, she used to be at the UAM, and the organization is the Buy Back Black organization. Her number is 347-385-1500. They have a very good organization where they're dealing with where you want to start at.
Black merchants.
So this is something that we can start ourselves and get in with other people that look like you and that's trying to fight the fight. It's another organization.
And just another little another little additive, and we're not talking negative, but we're just talking about how your central government works. There's an individual that wrote a book. He went through research and said how the U.S. government segregated America. The white people who run this country is no different than the white people who ran South Africa. They're segregationists. How? It's codified. That's what you call red line. It's codified. You don't sell up African people. You don't give them loans. You do nothing to help them because you are the one who kept. They want to keep you in whatever form they want to keep. So they have a book you can go get. How the United States segregated America. There is no difference. The Pope of the world is a third-generation Italian that left his grandfather, great-grandfather left Italy, running from the wars and poverty, and his great-grandfather who's the Pope now is third-generation Italian. That means his great-grandfather came to Argentina, one of them. That means he came, did exterminated his great-grandfather, and the rest of them helped to exterminate the indigenous people. I'm not doing rape. I'm telling the Pope tells you I'm a third-generation Italian. Ain't no more whatever country he come from. We kill off the Indians. We kill off the Africans.
That's right.
Anybody from the Zoom want to ask Doc a question? So, Brother Tone, those are two starts. And if you keep on, you got Dr. McIntyre, Simotep. It's some people doing something. And, of course, if you're in America, you're here, and you got to make your way like Doc says. Are there any other questions? Okay, Doc is going to wind it down with the 5 minute more, and then we're going to shut it down for what he wants to say.
A friend of mine came to me, he's a young brother, and he said to me, praise him, he's got what I mentioned it before, he got African and Indian, people come from that area. Because he doesn't know India and Pakistan is still 90% African. The people of the Adivasi, the largest group of recognized human beings who live outside of Africa is in India, Pakistan. Almost 200 million directly identified. All those black people are you. And he was praising his what they call the Indian part of him. I said, you're African Indian. Those people who come from the Indian part, they're still African. Do you know why they brought you here? He's talking about they gave his great-grandfather indentured service. So I said, and I told him what happened. I said, the Indian, modern India, and the white from Britain was discussing how many people the British had killed when India, Pakistan was under their rule. And the white European scholar said, we only killed 30 million of you Indians. He said, we killed, the Indian scholar said, you killed at least 75 million. So that's how they've been killing by the millions. So I said, if they were killing your great-great-grandfather, who was black, killing you by the millions, you think they now are going to take that same person they've been killing and raping and give them a contract to be paid? Well, you don't understand your history when you do that. Okay, so that's the first thing. The thing I'll end with, this is some of the statistics that somebody comes up with. 2% of the world's population is in the United States.
2%?
2% of the world's population, you check it out. Half of that has to be non-white people, right? So that means that 1% of the world's population of white people, there's only 1% of the world, white people, there's only 1%. In Europe, they claim there's at least 5% of the white population remaining in the world. So you take that 5 million and you take off 1 million because of all of the Iranians, all of the Arabs that are there, all the Africans. So right now, only 5% of the world's population, by the count of the white man or whoever's counting, only 5% is white. The white population, they say, is negative birth rate. So what do you think is going to happen if every man and woman had sex, but they don't have babies? 100 years, there will be no more human beings. You must have have babies. So if white people are only 5% of the world's population, and their negative birth rate, look up to 30 years from now. Africa is supposed to have 1.4 billion. And they say at the present birth rate, 1/3 of the population of the world will be Africans in the continent. 1/3. We are having babies. The most important thing is that you have children for the next generation, and you do what Brother Torore and all good Pan-African do. You bring Africa under your total control so that you can provide a quality life and protection under your gun so nobody can bother you. That's what I see in the long run for African people. I'm looking up, even I'm 81, chances are I may not make it by 2050. But what I'm glad is that if the world don't blow up, that at least we as African people going to be here. We're going to be 1/3 of the population on the continent by everybody's count just in Africa. Then when you add on the Africans in America and the Africans here and here, we're going to make 50% of the world's population. And Africa, another 30 years, is going to be more industrialized than Europe. And you see it coming because the trade in the next 4 or 5 years is already there. 90%, about 5 or 10 years at the rate they're going 90 or 95% of the world's global trade is going to be in Africa and Asia. And guess what? When we look at the map he had here, remember the east coast of Africa, from Ethiopia, from Egypt all the way to South Africa, there are about 21 major ports. And they're upgrading all the ports. 21. And who's on this side of it? Asia. Okay? And they're already mapping out direction so that when you come in through Chabahar, that port in Iran, they're going to build railroads and trains that will take the goods from India. The goods that can come into Chabahar in Iran, they're going to be shipped north to do trade with Turkey and the other one. They're shipped north to do trade with Russia and Europe. And most of the trade of Asia is going to be on the East Coast with those 21 ports. They're getting it ready. So if you and I live in the next 10 years, the ports in Europe and the United States, they're vacant now. They're not making anything. So most of the trade and stuff is now in Asia. So in about 15 years, 95% of the global trade, wood, oil, and stuff is going to be between Asian bloc and the west coast, east coast of Africa. West coast going to be there. That's your long-range future. You stay here and you fight like hell. But you know what's coming. They know what's coming. So you keep, okay, let me just tell you quickly my definition of Pan-Africanism. If you take care of your personal family, your children and grandmother, stuff, if you take care of your personal family, because we're here, I give you an associate degree in Pan-Africanism. If you're able to further your efforts to help your community beyond your immediate family, I'll give you a bachelor's degree in Pan-Africanism. If you're able or have the capacity to go and help an African country outside of the United States, but not in Africa, Cuba, Dominican Republic, wherever it is, I'll give you your master's degree. And if you're able to get on a continent and try to help build it, or if you do like Dr. Ben, who gave tens of millions of dollars to the Nubian villages when we went. He didn't just take to it. Most of the money Doc made, and we gave him, he built up that thing. I give Doc a PhD. I give Dr. Clark. You don't get a PhD until you can set yourself on the continent to help build it, or at least send some money, or if you can help some people to help you. That's how you build a Pan-African world like it was before 500 years where the Europeans kill all of you down. You want to be here. Whoever's here 2050, that's what you're going to see your glory. Now, I don't know how we're going to be here battling out with these people here. They say 90-80% of white people and stuff are now saying that the economy is so bad, according to some of their studies, they want to leave. They know the game is over. That's what you have. You have the world because you're going to have people. A third of the population will be you. You're going to have the most natural resources. It's going to be great for African people. But what's going to happen to the indigenous that are in Australia? I don't know. What's going to happen to us? I don't know.
In Cuba, and other parts of the world.
These people are dealing with all of them billionaires and trillionaires. You see, what's his name? This guy who makes the cars, Tesla.
Oh, yeah.
He loses $100 billion in a day. That's paper, that's nothing.
Musk, right?
Tell me, what does that mean?
Elon Musk.
Nonsense. You gotta have population, you gotta have people. You have to have resources to project your power. That's what we after.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, give Doc a great big hand. That's it, audience. You can have a little conversation while we clean up, but we want to give Doc a great big hand. This is part 2. We're going to continue with, it's going to be on maybe 10-part series on the Moors, Ethiopia, and the economy. So give Doc a great big hand. I'll be texting everybody for the next speaker. It should be Miss Tyreen Wright, but give Doc a great big hand. And you can have any conversation you want with him till we clean up.
The fact that you survived.